In a boardroom of billionaires and polished lawyers, it wasn't a translator or an executive who exposed the trap hidden in Arabic. It was the maid pouring water. The conference room gleamed like a jewel box suspended above Manhattan, every detail designed to radiate power. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city's skyline, glass towers glinting in the late morning sun. The marble conference table stretched endlessly, polished to such a shine it mirrored the chandelier light overhead. Men in dark suits leaned forward with poised pens, translators sat with headphones ready, assistants typed silently on the perimeter. This was a gathering where every word could move millions, and silence was the default language. At the far end of the table, Sheikh Hassan al-Rashid adjusted his cufflinks, their platinum edges catching the light. He had the composure of someone used to being obeyed without question. When he spoke, his voice rolled deep and deliberate, velvet covering steel. He leaned into Arabic, his dialect sharp and precise, weaving a phrase that sounded benign to untrained ears but carried a hidden hook. The clause, once translated, would seem like a mere formality, a nod to compliance. But in truth, it was a subtle override, a mechanism to seize control long after the ink dried. Only a native's ear, trained in both finance and law, could catch the sting buried within. The translators paused, nodding nervously. They scribbled neutral versions, erasing the thorns from the rose. The executives murmured approval, unaware of the trap being laid before them. And then it happened. From the sidewall where the staff stood as if part of the decor, a voice answered in the same dialect. Clear, confident, undeniably correct. The words cut through the air with the precision of a scalpel. That phrasing is not a safeguard, Your Excellency. It is a retroactive override. The sound froze the room. Every head turned at once, 12 suits swiveling in perfect unison. A collective intake of breath rattled through the silence. For a moment, no one could place the voice. It hadn't come from the legal team, nor the translators, nor the row of polished assistants with laptops glowing. Instead, it had come from a woman in a crisp housekeeping uniform, standing with her back to the wall, holding a silver tray of bottled water. Her name tag read, Maya. The tray didn't shake in her hands. Her eyes didn't flinch. She stepped forward just enough to set a bottle gently on the table nearest her, then straightened, her posture composed. The chandelier light caught the faint sheen on her forehead, but her expression remained calm, steady, assured. She met the billionaire's gaze across the vast table without lowering her eyes. For the first time in years, Sheikh Hassan al-Rashid faltered. His brow creased, his mouth paused mid-command. The arrogance of a man used to being the smartest in the room cracked, just for a second. "You speak Arabic?" he demanded in English, his tone sharp enough to slice glass. Maya replied in Arabic, her accent flawless, her delivery precise. "I not only speak it, I understand the difference between intention and manipulation." Gasps erupted like sparks along the table. One white-haired partner leaned back, muttering, "Is she even staff?" A whisper shot across the room. "She's a maid." Hassan's gaze hardened. He did not raise his voice, but every syllable landed with weight. "You interrupt my statement in front of my counterparts and accuse me of deception? This is disrespectful." He gestured toward security at the door. "Remove her." The guards stepped forward, chairs scraped, the air thickened with tension. And still Maya stood tall. Her fingers tightened at her sides, but she did not retreat. Her voice, steady as iron wrapped in velvet, carried across the marble and glass. "I meant no disrespect, sir. Only clarity." For a beat, no one breathed. Then, from halfway down the table, an executive murmured, "She might be right." Another voice followed, hesitant but louder. "Perhaps the clause should be clarified." Hassan's eyes locked on her once more. He lifted a hand, halting security in place. He said nothing for a long, punishing moment. The silence was so heavy it felt as though the entire city below held its breath. When he finally spoke, it was not to the room. It was to her. "You are not just a maid." And Maya, standing in her worn uniform, back straight, replied softly, "No, but that's what pays the bills right now." The room shifted, the ground beneath every suit and tie unsettled. For the first time in years, power had bent. Not to money, not to title, but to a voice no one expected to hear. The service elevator rattled as it descended, carrying Maya down into the belly of the Empire Grand. She gripped the railing tightly, her knuckles pale against the steel. The moment replayed in her head, the hush that fell, the eyes that pierced, the billionaire who nearly crushed her with a single command before sparing her in front of everyone. She had spoken up when no one else dared, and now, for better or worse, her life would never be the same. When the doors opened, the clamor of the hotel's underworld swallowed her whole. Kitchen staff shouted over. Sizzling pans, carts rolled along tiled corridors, and dishwashers clattered like machinery in a factory. Yet even here, whispers chased her. Heads turned as she walked past. "That's her," someone muttered. The maid who talked back to him. Some voices sounded impressed, others scornful, but all carried the weight of what she had done. Her supervisor, Mr. Jenkins, waited in the locker room, his shirt collar askew, face slick with sweat. "Williams," he barked. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Maya met his glare. "I told the truth. You embarrassed us. This hotel survives on reputation and discretion, not whatever stunt you just pulled." He jabbed a finger toward her chest. "You're finished. Pack your things." But before Maya could respond, another voice sliced through the room like a gavel. "She stays." The crowd of employees parted as Veronica Ellison stepped in, the hotel's general manager, tall, composed, her silver hair framing eyes as sharp as polished glass. She was rarely seen outside her office, but when she did appear, her presence commanded silence. "Miss Williams may have disrupted your meeting, Mr. Jenkins," Veronica said evenly, "but she also prevented a disaster. That contract would have signed away more than these men realized. I've already received calls, some furious, some grateful. She'll not be punished for protecting the truth." Jenkins sputtered. "But that will be all," Veronica cut in. Her gaze turned to Maya. 3 o'clock, my office. Don't be late." Maya's heart hammered. The GM's office? It was a place staff only whispered about. She nodded, unable to speak. When the hour came, she stood outside Veronica's door on the 31st floor, palms damp against her uniform. Through the glass, she saw the sweep of the Hudson River, light glinting off water as though mocking her nerves. She smoothed her collar, aware of its faded stitching, and knocked. "Enter," came the firm voice. Inside, the office was minimalist, its walls lined with awards and photographs, diplomatic handshakes, global summits, even one with a former president. Veronica herself sat behind a sleek desk, eyes narrowed in quiet appraisal. "Sit," she instructed. Maya obeyed, spine straight. "You worked in Abu Dhabi?" Veronica asked without preamble. "Yes, ma'am, at the National Sovereign Fund." Veronica raised an eyebrow. 3 years? Risk Compliance Division? Contracts over 100 million? Maya's throat tightened. "Yes." "Then why are you serving water here?" Maya hesitated, eyes falling to her lap. "My mother got sick. I came home to care for her. After she passed, the gap in my resume, people stopped seeing my degree. They just saw my name, my skin, my place." For a moment, silence hung. Then Veronica leaned back, her expression unreadable. "Today, you made the right people notice again. You could have stayed silent, let them sign, but you didn't." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick binder, its pages dense with legal text and sticky notes. She pushed it across the desk. "This is the contract they were reviewing. Annotated. Show me where the problems are. You have 24 hours. Maya stared at it as though it weighed more than gold. Her pulse roared in her ears. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you have something no one else in that room did," Veronica replied. "The courage to speak." That night, in her small apartment with its flicky ring light and coughing radiator, Maya spread the binder across her kitchen table. Highlighters, pens, and sticky notes surrounded her like weapons in a battlefield. She brewed tea, tied her hair back, and began to read. Clause by clause, she fought through the text. Strategic ambiguity disguised as safety, retroactive authority cloaked as flexibility, ownership displacement masked as partnership. Each trap revealed itself under her relentless gaze. By midnight, her back ached, her eyes blurred, but her resolve only sharpened. She thought of her father's compass tucked away under her bed, his reminder that justice was a road you had to walk, even in the dark. As the city hummed outside her window, Maya whispered to herself, "Not this time." And somewhere, in a penthouse high above the skyline, Sheikh Hassan al-Rashid poured himself a glass of whiskey and replayed her words in his mind. The maid who had spoken Arabic like a blade, the woman who had cut through his power. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, unease, and curiosity. Tomorrow, he decided, would test her again. The next morning dawned gray and cold, Manhattan draped in mist that clung to the skyscrapers like a shroud. Maya's hands trembled as she adjusted the plain gray dress she'd pulled from the back of her closet, the closest thing she had to business attire. It wasn't new, not sleek like the tailored suits of the men she had stood among yesterday, but it was hers. She clipped the borrowed leather binder shut, tucked it under her arm, and whispered to her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, "Stand tall, speak only when needed, but don't vanish." By noon, the conference room was alive again, a theater of power and ego. Executives shuffled papers, translators reset their devices, and the air thrummed with anticipation. The long marble table gleamed beneath the chandelier's glare, and at its head sat Sheikh Hassan al-Rashid, immovable, untouchable. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes flickered with something new, an edge of calculation. When Maya entered, a hush rippled. The same men who had looked through her the day before now tracked her with wary eyes. She felt the weight of their skepticism, some cloaked in polite smiles, others in outright scowls. Whispers darted across the room like shadows. Why is she here? Is this a stunt? She's a maid. Veronica Ellison, poised as ever, walked at Maya's side. She broke the silence with the authority only she could wield. "Gentlemen, Miss Williams will be assisting today in reviewing the contract revisions." A junior partner from Landstone Holdings, Michael Trent, leaned back in his chair with a smirk sharp enough to cut. "With all due respect, Miss Ellison, we have seasoned attorneys for that. What exactly is her clearance?" His eyes slid to Maya like a blade, meant to humiliate. Maya felt her pulse throb in her throat, but she refused to shrink. She placed the binder on the table, flipped it open, and spoke calmly, her words precise. "My clearance is written in the footnotes you ignored. Clause 7/4, Article 14, the Foreign Investment Act. What you translated as discretionary oversight was, in fact, unilateral override authority." She tapped the margin note she had scrawled in neat handwriting. "Had you signed, you would have surrendered decision-making in perpetuity." The rope stilled. Trent's smirk faltered, replaced by a clenched jaw. Sheikh Hassan's gaze sharpened, studying Maya not with contempt, but with an intensity that unnerved her. 2 hours passed in a tense ballet of negotiation. Maya spoke sparingly, only when pressed, but each time she did, the axis of the conversation shifted. She dissected clauses with surgical precision, drawing on cultural nuance, weaving metaphors from Arabic literature that even made Hassan pause. "An olive tree," she explained, "cannot be uprooted and replanted in foreign soil without care. If you grant authority without boundaries, you plant in sand, and sand consumes." For the first time, Hassan leaned forward, hands steepled, and asked her directly, "How would you phrase it then?" Maya suggested an alternative clause, specific, respectful, culturally balanced. The American lawyers blinked at her fluency. The Gulf partners nodded in approval, a balance restored by someone who, by every measure, should not have been in the room. But not everyone was swayed. During the mid-session recess, Maya stepped into the hallway for air, the cool stone wall pressed against her back, her chest rising and falling with the effort of control. That was when Michael Trent appeared. Tall, polished, his jaw rigid with disdain, he crossed his arms and leaned close enough that his words cut like venom. "You don't belong here," he hissed. "You're not part of this deal. You don't have clearance, and you sure as hell don't have a seat at this table because you corrected one sentence." Maya swallowed, forcing her voice steady. "Then perhaps you should have read the footnotes." His face darkened, but before he could retort, another voice slid into the space, smooth, commanding. "Mr. Trent," Veronica Ellison said, stepping out from the shadows. "If you have concerns about staff assignments, you may take them up with me. Otherwise, I suggest you return to the table before you embarrass yourself further." Trent stiffened, muttered something under his breath, and stormed off. Veronica turned to Maya, her gaze sharp but softened at the edges. "Are you all right?" Maya nodded, though her hands still trembled. "Good," Veronica said simply. "Because change terrifies men like him. And you? You are change." Back in the room, Hassan leaned forward as the negotiations resumed. "Miss Williams," he said in Arabic, his tone measured but weighted. "You speak with more than language. You speak with understanding. That is rare." When the final clauses were agreed upon hours later, the contract safe from manipulation, Hassan rose, his robe shifting like flowing ink in the light. The room waited for him to close. Instead, he reached into his pocket and drew out a small coin, worn at the edges, etched with Arabic script. He walked to Maya, extended his hand, and placed it in her palm. "In our culture," he said softly, "when someone saves a negotiation, we give them a token, not as payment, as memory." Maya stared down at the coin, the weight of it both symbolic and crushing. For the first time, she felt the eyes in the room, not on her uniform, not on her station, but on her, truly on her. But as the suits filed out, whispers followed, some respectful, some resentful. And Maya understood. She had been seen, but being seen came with danger. Later that night, as she walked home through the cold streets of Queens, the coin pressed against her palm, she felt the ground shift beneath her life. Once she had trained herself to disappear, but today she had spoken, and silence would never protect her again. Rain streaked across the glass walls of the Empire Grand as the next chapter of Maya's life began, not in the shadows of the service corridor, but in the high-rise offices of Al Rashid Capital's American branch. The lobby smelled of cedar and polished marble, every detail radiating wealth and precision. Just weeks before, Maya had carried bottled water through these same corridors. Today, she stepped in with a clearance badge clipped to her blazer, a leather binder under her arm, and the lingering weight of a coin in her pocket, the token Sheikh Hassan had pressed into her hand. Her presence stirred the room before she spoke a word. Security guards nodded more formally than before. Junior analysts whispered, eyes darting from her face to her badge, as if struggling to reconcile what they saw with what they remembered. And seated at the long mahogany desks were attorneys who had trained their whole lives for this world. Their expressions flickered with skepticism, some tight-lipped, others curious, all measuring her. Veronica Ellison was waiting. She motioned Maya into the conference room where contracts sprawled across the table like a battlefield map. "You'll be reviewing equity clauses for the next 2 joint ventures," she said. "Find the traps before they find us." At the far end, Harold Coington, senior legal counsel, glanced up, his smirk faint but dismissive. "You're not licensed to practice law, Miss Williams. You know that?" Maya held his gaze without blinking. "I don't need to argue the law. I just need to spot the clause hiding in the footnotes." A murmur ran down the table. Someone chuckled nervously. Others exchanged glances. Harold only grunted and returned to his notes. Hours passed, the city's light shifting from gray morning to golden dusk as Maya pored over the documents. Her pen raced in the margins, circling words like operational exigency, retroactive adjustment, perpetuity licensing. They weren't phrases, they were weapons. By late afternoon, she had flagged 3 major clauses that would have gutted control from Al Rashid Capital and buried the hotel in foreign lawsuits. She emailed her annotations, leaned back in her chair, and let her aching eyes rest. But peace never lasted. In the copy room later that evening, as she waited for the printer to hum out her flagged revisions, voices floated in from the hall, male voices, calm but edged. "I'm telling you, she's digging too deep." She wasn't supposed to question Zurich. She flagged it to Veronica. "If it goes to compliance, we're screwed." The footsteps moved away, leaving silence behind. But Maya stood frozen, heart pounding. Zurich. She hadn't touched any Zurich documents, not yet. That night, in her small Queens apartment, she sat hunched over her laptop long past midnight. She keyed in Zurich into the firm's internal archive. One file appeared, buried deep in a miscellaneous subsidiary folder. She opened it, and the screen lit with a number so large it made her inhale sharply. $23 million. The ledger entry claimed environmental reallocation. But there was no project, no signatures, no timeline, just a ghost transaction threaded through Cyprus, then Singapore, and finally Zurich. This wasn't an error, it was a cover. Maya leaned back in her chair, pulse racing. She stared at the numbers, the looping wire transfers, the hollow justification. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, torn between flagging it immediately or digging deeper. First, if she flagged it, the culprits would bury it. If she dug deeper, she might be digging her own grave. Her phone buzzed suddenly, making her jump. A text from Veronica. Private, 7:00 a.m., my office, alone. Maya exhaled slowly. Veronica knew. She barely slept. At dawn, she walked through the misty streets, coffee clutched in one hand, her other hand brushing against the coin in her pocket. It felt heavier than ever, as if warning her, speaking truth comes with a price. Inside Veronica's office, sunlight streamed in, casting the older woman in a silhouette of quiet power. She didn't look up when Maya entered. "You found it," she said flatly. Maya froze. "I haven't said—" "You don't need to. The system logs searches. I got the alert." Finally, Veronica turned, her eyes sharper than glass. That Zurich payment was disguised. It was pushed through just before Hassan's first U.S. visit. Some on the board thought sweetening the deal would cement trust. "I only discovered it weeks ago, but I couldn't trace it alone. That's why I needed you." Maya's stomach twisted. "So you used me?" Veronica's expression softened for the first time. "No, I trusted you. That's not the same." Maya stared at her, torn between relief and betrayal. "And now?" "Now," Veronica said, her voice low. "You finish what you started. Follow that trail until it breaks. Find me the names. because if we don't, they'll bury us both. Later that night, Maya sat again at her table, the glow of the laptop painting her face in cold light. She traced the Zurich trail deeper, into Delaware shells, Cayman trusts, obscure subsidiaries, and then, in the metadata of one archived email, she found a signature. Philip Warren, the firm's suave external advisor, the same man who had warned her once, truth cuts both ways. Maya's blood ran cold. As she snapped a photo of the file with her secure phone, her screen flickered. Then, without warning, it went black. System override. Her heart stuttered. The hum of the tower still whirred, but the monitor was dead. And then came it. The sound. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment. Heavy, pausing, moving closer. Maya reached into her desk drawer and gripped her late father's silver flashlight. Not for light, but for weight. Then came the knock. Not polite, not patient. A single, heavy thud. She pressed her eye to the peephole. A man stood there in a dark jacket. No badge, no delivery, no smile. His face calm, expressionless, but his eyes sweeping the hall like a predator. He knocked again. Maya didn't answer. She stood frozen, gripping the flashlight until her hands hurt. And then, after an agonizing minute, he turned to leave, but not before pausing to look directly into the peephole, as if he knew she was watching. When the silence finally returned, Maya let out the breath she'd been holding. Her world had shifted again. She wasn't just in the boardroom battle anymore. She was being hunted. And the Zurich trail had only just begun to burn. The hum of the city outside her apartment never sounded so menacing. Even the sirens in the distance carried an edge, like warnings whispered too late. Maya sat in the dark, the unplugged laptop on her table, its hard drive tucked safely beneath a floorboard in her closet. Her hands still trembled from the man. At her door, the way he had stared directly into the peephole, daring her to breathe. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old radiator, every shuffle of feet in the hallway sent jolts through her chest. She knew one thing for certain. Zurich wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was blood money, and now she had painted herself in its crosshairs. By dawn, her exhaustion was masked by adrenaline. She carried the encrypted phone to a cafe 2 blocks away, connecting through public Wi-Fi. Fingers flying across the keys, she sent an encoded message to Veronica. I was breached. Suspect physical tail. Must meet off-site. 10 minutes later, a reply. Elmhurst Library. Basement conference room. Noon. Burn this number. When noon came, Maya walked into the library, its hushed silence carrying the same tension as a battlefield. Veronica sat alone at a wooden table in the basement. No laptop, no files, only a pen and a pad of paper. You're not paranoid, Veronica said, her eyes never leaving Maya's face. Someone tried to access my drive at 3 a.m. That's not coincidence. Maya slid the Zurich printouts across. Philip Warren's signature is on it. He's not just laundering, he's orchestrating. Veronica's jaw tightened. I suspected as much. He's too smooth, too untouchable. But if his name is attached, this doesn't stop at the board. He has allies, Maya, powerful ones. What happens now? Maya asked. We get proof strong enough to crush deniability. Originals, signatures, witness testimony. The board meets in 10 days. If we walk in empty-handed, they bury us. If we walk in with the truth, they bury Warren. Maya nodded, though her stomach churned. She knew what it meant. Every hour between now and then would be a knife's edge. That evening, the knife came to her door. She had barely locked the latch when she felt it, a presence inside. The air shifted, heavier, charged. She turned, and there he was, Philip Warren. Tailored suit, leather briefcase embossed with his initials, calm as if he owned the very walls. He was seated in her living room chair, legs crossed, sipping from a glass he had poured himself from her cabinet. Well done, he said smoothly, lifting the glass in mock salute. I warned you, truth cuts both ways. You've proven sharper than most. Maya's breath hitched, but she didn't retreat. You broke into my home. He tilted his head, amused. I prefer the word intervened. I'm here to offer you a choice. Her grip tightened around the edge of the chair. A bribe. A lifeline, he corrected. 6 figures, a new identity, a fresh start in whatever corner of the world you like. You disappear quietly, and I tidy up this Zurich mess. Everyone wins. Maya stared at him, cold fury rising in her chest. Everyone except the people who were promised clean water, except the tribes still drinking poison, except the children choking on what you redirected. Philip sighed, almost disappointed. Idealism, dangerous currency in this city. Do you think Hassan himself is pure? Do you think these deals aren't greased in shadows? The only difference between me and the rest of them is that I don't pretend. He stood slowly, adjusting his cufflinks, his voice dropping into something colder. Understand this. The moment Veronica steps into that, At a board meeting, she's finished. They'll bury her in procedure. And you'll go from novelty consultant to cautionary tale. Maya's pulse pounded. Every instinct screamed to throw him out, but something steadier guided her hand. She reached into her coat pocket, fingers brushing a small recording dongle. An old device she'd started carrying the moment she realized she was being hunted. It had been running since she walked in. She clicked it quietly enough to be unnoticed. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "You threatened me the day we met. Now you're just confirming who you are." Philip smirked, stepping closer. "That recording won't hold up in court. It's inadmissible." "It doesn't need to," Maya replied evenly. "It just needs to reach Hassan." For the first time, his composure cracked. His smile faltered, his eyes narrowing into something darker. Then, with a slow exhale, he stepped back. "You think you're clever, but you've drawn blood, and men who draw blood rarely live long enough to enjoy it." He placed the glass down gently on her counter, the sound ringing like a bell. Then he walked to the door, pausing only to glance over his shoulder. "Be careful where you aim your heels, Miss Williams. The higher you climb, the farther you fall." The lock clicked behind him. Silence returned. Maya's knees nearly buckled, but she stayed upright, the dongle burning hot in her hand. She replayed his words in her head, enough to destroy him, if delivered to the right ears. At dawn, she slipped a small envelope into a courier's bag addressed to Veronica. Inside was the USB drive, labeled in her neat handwriting. "The rest is up to you." By noon in the boardroom high above the city, Sheikh Hassan al-Rashid would press play on Philip's own voice, dripping with arrogance and self-incrimination, and the room, once so eager to ignore a maid, would finally hear the sound of corruption unraveling. But Maya knew this wasn't victory, not yet, because snakes didn't vanish when cornered, they coiled, and the most dangerous strike always came after exposure. The boardroom on the 37th floor was colder than the morning wind sweeping off the Hudson. Not because of the temperature, the heat vents whispered softly in the corners, but because of what hung in the air. Reckoning. The long mahogany table stretched like a battlefield between two sides. On one end sat Maya Williams, her laptop open, Veronica Ellison steady at her side, a folder of paper evidence spread like a deck of sharpened blades. Across from them sat Philip Warren and Harold Coington, legal counsel and trusted advisor, men who until yesterday had been untouchable titans in tailored suits. Their faces told the story now, Philip tight-lipped but defiant, Harold masking panic with a strained, brittle smile. When Sheikh Hassan al-Rashid entered, the entire room rose instinctively. His robe whispered across the polished floor as he took his place at the head, flanked by golf partners whose expressions were carved in stone. He sat, folded his hands, and nodded once. "Proceed." The lights dimmed slightly as Veronica connected the USB to the display. With a click, Philip's own voice spilled into the room, recorded in Maya's apartment only hours before. "Do you think Hassan himself is pure? Do you think these deals aren't greased in shadows? The only difference between me and the rest of them is that I don't pretend. 6 figures, a new identity, disappear, and I tidy up this Zurich mess. Everyone wins." The silence that followed was suffocating. No one moved. No one breathed. Then murmurs began, sharp, furious, incredulous. Golf partners whispered in Arabic. Western investors exchanged pale, frantic looks. Philip broke the silence, his voice harsh but steady. "That was an illegally obtained recording. Inadmissible." Veronica snapped the remote and another slide appeared. The Zurich transaction trail. Wire routes through Cyprus, Singapore, Zurich. Stamped emails, metadata logs. And finally, Elijah Rowe's affidavit, his testimony sworn in ink, decades of reputation behind his words. "This isn't hearsay," Maya said, her voice calm but iron-edged. "This is corroborated fact. Funds earmarked for environmental justice initiatives in tribal lands were siphoned off into shell firms, tied directly to Mr. Warren and concealed with legal misdirection by Mr. Coington. Projects promised clean water to native communities. Instead, the money went to private equity pockets." Harold's smile cracked, his knuckles tightening against the table. "This is out of context. The legal structure allows for flexible reallocations." "Do not insult me," Hassan thundered. His calm, cultivated poise shattered. His voice rolled like thunder across the glass walls. "We fund these initiatives to restore what others have broken, not to enrich charlatans in suits." Philip leaned forward, defiance flickering in his eyes. "We acted in the firm's best interest, diversifying assets, optimizing capital. By stealing from poisoned children?" spat one of the Gulf partners, his voice thick with disgust. The weight of the accusation hung in the air like smoke. Hassan's eyes narrowed, black fire burning within. "In accordance with Clause 7.4 of this board's governance charter, I enact emergency suspension. Effective immediately, Mr. Warren and Mr. Coington are stripped of authority. All access revoked. IT, remove their devices. The doors opened as two compliance officers strode in, flanked by security. Philip's laptop was pulled from his hands, Harold's phone confiscated. Philip did not resist, but his eyes found Maya across the table, and in that stare was venom. Silent, lingering, promising this wasn't over. The rest of the room buzzed, partners firing questions, legal teams panicking. Veronica pressed the next slide. Upcoming contracts with ambiguous override language. Fresh traps. She spoke sharply. These must be restructured before signature. I recommend full oversight. Hassan turned, his gaze landing on Maya. Are you comfortable with that? The room stilled. Every head turned to her. The maid who had once carried water bottles now asked if she would hold the line against billion-dollar deception. Maya's throat tightened. This was beyond anything she had imagined. But she remembered her father's compass, the brass token in her pocket, the voices of the tribes denied clean water. She straightened. Yes, Your Excellency, I'd be honored. A murmur rippled across the table. Robert Malloy, one of the American partners, leaned forward. This signals transparency. I support it. One by one, reluctant nods followed. The tide was shifting. Hassan inclined his head. So be it. From this moment, no document reaches my desk without her review. It was done. A maid, once invisible, now became the gatekeeper of integrity. When the meeting adjourned, the board filed out in tense silence. Hassan remained. He motioned for Maya to join him privately in his sunlit suite. Books lined the walls, Middle Eastern art glowing in the morning light. He poured tea himself, a gesture of humility rare from a man like him. You have served with more integrity in weeks than some men in decades, he said quietly. Why did you fight so hard? Maya hesitated, then answered, her voice trembling but firm. Because I've lived in places where justice was an afterthought, and I refused to stay silent when silence is complicity. For a long moment, Hassan simply studied her. Then he handed her an envelope. My team will offer you a permanent advisory position. Full clearance, equal voice. You will chair an ethics council. Will you accept? Maya held the envelope, its weight like destiny in her hands. The world she had been pushed out of was opening again, not through mercy, but through courage. That night, she returned to her apartment in Queens. On her desk sat her father's compass and the brass token. She placed the envelope beside them, tears burning her eyes. She whispered to the silent room, Justice doesn't sleep, it wakes us. Outside her window, the city blazed with light, and though snakes still hid in the shadows, Maya knew one truth. The fight was only beginning. But this time, she wasn't fighting to be seen. She was fighting because she was the one holding the torch.